Hello, Shade with PropertyTaxList.com with a short training video about 3 topics. We're going to talk about property deeds, quiet title, and foreclosure. So we're going to cover a lot here pretty quickly. First off, let's talk for just a moment about property deeds, because we deal with property deeds on a regular basis with tax sales. In fact, we deal with different types of deeds. Typically, we use the term tax deed to describe the properties that have been foreclosed on due to delinquent taxes, but sometimes they're referred to as sheriff's deeds. There are other types of deeds that we may hear sometimes, quitclaim deed or warranty deed. That may be a deed that some people are familiar with. Now, a warranty deed is a special one specifically because it has an implied warranty attached to it that the property's free of liens or claims or encumbrances essentially to it. It's required, though, for title insurance, which lenders require for all mortgages. Now, that's a significant factor, and that's important for a couple reasons here. First off, let's just talk about what a title insurance company does, if anybody's lost with this. Because it can get a little bit confusing. First off, when you go to borrow money from a lender, one of the things they're going to require from you in the mortgage application process is to get title insurance on the transaction. Title insurance is when a title insurance company is hired to perform a title search on the property in question, the property that they'll loan on. And once the title search company has performed an adequate search and they feel comfortable with it, they'll offer insurance on the transaction. And what they're really doing is ensuring that the lien is free of, that the property's free of any claims against it that could harm the person taking possession of the property. So in other words, they're just trying to watch out for anything that might be attached to the property so they don't get burned on something, if that makes sense. Now, one of the issues that you run into is that in order to get title insurance, you would have to get that from one of these title insurance companies, and title insurance companies require a warranty deed in order to provide title insurance. Now, that would be an issue if you only have a tax deed. In other words, you can't, somebody that wants to get a loan to buy your property couldn't just go and get a standard loan to buy the property because it's a tax deed, not a warranty deed. That could be an issue if you plan to sell it to somebody that will get a loan for the property. Now, there are lots of ways, I guess, around that, and that's only if you plan to sell the property immediately and if you want to sell it for as close to the full value as you can get. So we have some options, but that's something to understand right off the bat is when you get that tax deed, it's not a warranty deed. It is simply a tax deed, and that's because it's the easiest deed for the county to create. It doesn't have a lot of liability for them. It's simply a deed that's been created due to delinquent taxes. It's a tax deed. It's still a completely legitimate foreclosure, but it's not exactly a warranty deed because it doesn't have that implied warranty. Now, a tax deed can be converted into a warranty deed through a process called, it's actually a legal process called quiet title or quiet title action. And what that means is that you can contact a real estate attorney, that's within the state that the property resides in. And the real estate attorney can be hired to perform a quiet title action. It's a fairly common thing for them to get hired to do. And basically what they do is they will look into the property history a little bit, and they'll send out these notices to the prior parties of interest with the property. The parties that used to have an interest in the property. It's sort of like the foreclosure process, but it happens again, and this has happened a long time afterwards. And the idea is the attorney sends out these notices, and once a certain time period is elapsed, if there's no dispute to that, then they basically issue a judge can switch over the deed and turn it into a warranty deed once that's been satisfied, and that can take a short period of time. That can take as short as a couple months, or it can take upwards of 6 months. It all depends on the property. Some properties are different in terms of how complicated their ownership history is, and we can show more videos in the future how you can determine that. But also, this is something that can also be done or performed in a lot of states by owning the property for a long enough period of time. In many states, if you own the property and you're paying property taxes on it for a period of 3 or 4 years, they'll offer that a warranty deed on it after that point. So if you were renting it out long term, it wouldn't necessarily matter. Or if you're renting it out for a while, you could get you could go through this process while you're renting it out. So while the property's bringing in income. And it's also important to remember that quiet title, how quiet title is performed, as well as how every detail of a foreclosure is performed, is all part of state law. So that means that it varies from state to state. There are different ways that things are performed. Now, speaking of foreclosure, let's talk for just a minute about what you need to know regarding foreclosure. What's important to know, what will help you understand other aspects of tax sale investing? Well, the first thing to understand is that there are two types of foreclosure. You have a judicial foreclosure and then a non-judicial foreclosure. Now, why is that important? And what does it have to do with anything else? Well, lenders use non-judicial foreclosure to foreclose on delinquent mortgages. So most of the foreclosures that that take place, that you see in every city across the country, the majority of those are non-judicial foreclosures. Now, why exactly is that? It's because when borrowers when they go to sign their paperwork for a mortgage, one of the things that you sign within that paperwork, within that agreement, is a power of sale stipulation that essentially signs away your rights to a judicial foreclosure. They do this, you're really signing over your rights to a judicial foreclosure, and you're giving the lender the right to a non-judicial foreclosure. You're giving them the right to do that, and this enables the lender to foreclose in a shorter duration of time. It also gives them more power in the foreclosure. That's why they're able to foreclose so quickly, and it makes sense from their perspective why they would want to have a judicial foreclosure instead of a non-judicial foreclosure instead of a judicial foreclosure, because of just that duration. They can do it much faster. So what exactly is the primary difference between judicial and non-judicial foreclosure? Judicial foreclosures follow state laws very precisely, and they typically require more time to complete. If you haven't ever looked up any of the state laws regarding different things like property tax collection or foreclosure for different states that you're interested in, it's worth taking the time to do that. In fact, you'll find within the state manuals, or also even on property tax list at the end of the state section, in the state pages, at the end of each state section, there is a description of where you can find the laws regarding property tax collection. So if you just kind of copy and paste that into Google, you can typically pull up the state laws for this, for any of the states you're interested in, and you can read. State laws can be kind of difficult to decipher at times, depending on how they're written. But a lot of state laws are written in terms that they're difficult to understand. But reading them can teach you a lot about how a state operates and what they do. So, with a judicial foreclosure, the main points with that are that it's a foreclosure that takes place through the courts, through the county courts in many cases, and that it follows a set of state laws, meaning that it's very strict with who needs to be contacted and the means through which they're contacted. It needs to be some type of a verifiable way, and they have set durations that need to pass, and at the end of that, the county is given the power to foreclose, on that property, which they do. But it is a valid foreclosure in every sense of the word, meaning that it's every bit as valid. In some ways, it's more valid than the non-judicial foreclosure. If you're looking at it from that point of view, it's the judicial foreclosure is really what it's really the foreclosure that's done through the courts and that is done in a more organized manner. Now, some of you might ask, what about a mortgage? How does that play into this whole situation? Because in a lot of our minds, a mortgage is, such a big thing. Well, how does that fit into it? Well, in the eyes of the law, the mortgage company is just another owner. They are just another property owner, meaning that when the county government sends out foreclosure notices to property owners, the mortgage company will get a notice just like the property owner will get a notice. Now, why would a mortgage company receive a notice and not respond? Well, first off, maybe they don't receive the notice. Now that may not be because of anything malicious, but if they, let's say they haven't been accurate with their record keeping and they sold the loan to another company, for whatever reason, if somebody doesn't respond to this foreclosure notice, then the property will be foreclosed on. And if that time period comes and goes, basically it's the bottom line is when when that date comes, if somebody hasn't paid the bill, they'll foreclose on the property, even if there's a mortgage on the property, and that mortgage will be wiped out. It will be extinguished by the foreclosure. That's sort of what the foreclosure is all about. It's about extinguishing people's rights to claim, to the property. So that would include, the mortgage company's rights to claim. That's what they're trying to accomplish in having this foreclosure period and issuing the notice. Is they're trying to collect that money so they can avoid the foreclosure itself. So if they don't, the property will be foreclosed on, and they'll offer it at a tax sale. So some of the properties that you see, there are properties that have been offered that that used to have mortgages, but more often than not, when a property has a mortgage, the mortgage company steps forward and pays it off to avoid the foreclosure process. That's what happens most of the time. That's the norm. It's unusual, but it still happens when mortgage companies allow properties to go to foreclosure. And that may be because they just have a large number of properties. They're just so property rich right now with all their foreclosures that they're having a hard time even keeping track of them. That's just a theory. Anyhow, tune in for more videos as we discuss more training topics. If you'd like me to do a video on a certain topic, just let me know. Send an email to support@propertytaxlist.com.